Welcome to Growth Colony, Australia's B2B growth podcast. I'm Alex Hipwell. Each episode, we bring you B2B founders, CMOs, marketing and sales leaders to find out what makes them successful and what's behind their failures. Today on the podcast feed, we're sharing an edited version of our session on how B2B organizations can leverage public relations. Our guests include Boden Westover, the VP of Brand and Communications at Catapult. He's also a former pro basketball player for the Melbourne Tigers. Samantha Dybac, the founder and managing director of the PR Hub and host of the Influence Unlocked podcast. Check it out. And Kate Toon, the SEO queen, founder of the Kate Toon Group of Companies and author of Confessions of a Misfit Entrepreneur, How to Succeed in Business Despite Yourself. They're joined by Growth Colony host and founder of X-Growth, Shahin Hoda, to dive deep into the topic of PR, what it's really about, and how to use it to grow your business and build trust. Let's dive right in.
The first thing that I want to ask is, how do you go about define PR? I mean, for a long time I was like, PR, press releases, right? That's pretty much it. So how would you, what is PR from a standpoint of a company that is trying to get exposure?
Hopefully it's not just press releases, because we don't actually write press releases at Catapult, which I'll probably come back to in a later point. But I think of public relations as, the amplification of an organization's purpose and values. So it's defined in different ways at various organizations, depending sort of how you structure your team. So sometimes it's just media engagement, sometimes it's social media, sometimes it's events, sometimes it's everything. But it's essentially the maintenance of your company's image externally, which requires a deep understanding of your strategy to ensure that you're positioning your brand in the correct way with each story. So it's kind of an extension of your company's purpose. And if you can't understand that and why you're unique, I think you're always going to be a little bit behind the eight ball with PR.
You're going to have a bit of problem with PR and a lot of other things, right? Now, I kind of started with a misconception about PR, Samantha, where for a long time I was like, press releases. What are some of the usual misconceptions that you come across when you're dealing with clients and talking about PR with them? Like what is it that they thinking and you're like, well, that's you're off the, like you're not on the same page. What are some of the things that you come across?
Yeah, look, I loved just on that point. I loved what Boden was saying about how PR is an extension of a company's purpose, because that's very much where I think a lot of businesses do go wrong with public relations, or the misconception is very much around PR is just press releases, or we just need it when we're doing a company announcement and it's a tag on to the business, rather than, as Boden was saying, it should be part of the strategy, the overall strategy, and considering that in terms of where does PR fit when we're trying to achieve something with the business. So, as an example with clients, we will always start with business objectives and then work backwards to work out what the comms or the PR plan looks like to help them achieve those goals. So, that is one misconception. I think another thing about a misconception around PR is that it's fluff, that it's not measurable, that we just do a PR campaign and what did we get at the end of it? And I think part of that is the education process when you're speaking to a PR firm or a PR agency. And again, it's very much about seeing it as part of the strategic direction of the business and not just something that isn't measurable, because you can measure PR, not in the same way that you would a direct response campaign or, a click, paid for click campaign that you would do online. But it definitely has its own measurements if you, step back and look at how does it fit within what we're trying to achieve as a business, and then where do we think it can help us best do that. Right.
I definitely would like to come back to that point of measuring PR. That sounds like an interesting topic as well. And Kate, tell us a little bit about SEO and PR, because this is something that I've recently, probably in the past 2 years, kind of seen the connection between SEO and PR. We previously, just before this call, we were talking about, hey, a lot of people would look at SEO and be like, well, that's just digital marketing, where it really has turned into digital PR. Can you give us a little bit of an overview on that as well?
Well, I think lots of people think that SEO is a checkbox to be ticked, like it's something you do once. or that it's highly technical. You know, it's about your site speed and being responsive and all that kind of stuff. And while it is, don't get me wrong, that's really just the starting point. After that, you're in a kind of never-ending journey to just get your brand out there, because as Google gets increasingly competitive and sophisticated, it's always going to be easier to be found for who you are than what you do. So, you know, I want to be searching for Boden, Westover. I don't want to be searching for name of company or even what they do really necessarily. I want to be searching for the people, maybe the brand name, and you do that through getting your name out there, and PR obviously helps you do that. These days as well, I think we all probably know that links to your site have an influence on where Google ranks you. Google denies this to some degree, but we can see that sites that have a lot of great links from high-profile websites tend to do better in the search results. And the old tactics of getting links by, you know, comment spamming and putting yourself on directories, they don't really do anything these days. Really, a good quality link comes from building up a relationship with another site or media source, getting a story or an interview or a podcast, and then getting that link. We say in SEO terms that the harder a link is to get, the more worthwhile it is to have. And that's where PR comes into play, trying to find not necessarily newsworthy stories, but even just stories that other outlets are going to be interested in, are going to be willing to feature you on their site and give you a link back.
Right. And that's, you know, that's really the connection with SEO and PR becoming kind of that digital PR, where things like backlinks become really important, which we'll come back to that and definitely discuss that. So I kind of dropped out in the middle over there, and I was like, oh my goodness, the worst nightmare that someone on a webinar could have just happened. But I'm back. Okay. So let's talk about, you know, where would marketers start? Like, let's talk about the starting points. And Boden, I'd love to get your opinion on this. I remember years ago we had a chat, and you had some really interesting insights about, you know, if a marketer in an organization want to start doing some work around PR, what is your advice for them? Where should they get started?
Yeah, it's a good question. So to come back to sort of the purpose and your values and everything, I think probably positioning is one of the most important things in marketing. So knowing where you fit in the buyer's mind and what makes you unique compared to every other company in the world. So being able to hone in on that positioning and understanding what makes you interesting is pretty critical. And I would imagine Samantha in particular, when she first deals with the client, she's trying to like uncover, like, why am I working with this client? Why have they come to me, and what's special about them? And it's amazing how many people that work in companies don't really understand what that sort of unique selling proposition is for them. And you sort of have to keep asking them why. Like, okay, that's important, but why are you doing that? So honing in on that from the start is super important. So if there's nothing unique about your company, which I would say is pretty rare, then at that stage, just create something unique. So for example, like if you're a cafe, like make the biggest latte in Melbourne, or like donate 25% of your profits to a good cause or something. So something that ties your brand to something interesting, but also ties that interesting thing to your values and your purpose. And then I think once you have something worth talking about, like understanding how the media works is pretty critical. What you'll need to consider with the timing of your pitch. The three things I'm always pretty mindful of when I'm dealing with the media. So what's the hook? So is there already interest in this topic? The timeliness, so what's happening in the world right now, and then the proximity, like how close is it? So if we're releasing a new product, like right now, if we can somehow tie it to COVID-19, that's going to be a bit of a win. If it's about the AFL, obviously we'll only pitch locally, and then if something's happened, like a player got injured or whatever, we'll try and position the story around that. So knowing what's going on in the world is super important, and not just saying, I work for this company, we've released this thing, like, can you write about it, basically? Right.
Okay. And, you know, so getting started, and I would imagine this is quite similar to what you go through as well, Kate. Getting started with whether it's, you know, trying to get on podcasts and, you know, publications and so on and so forth. Where should people start? Should they, you know, start aiming way at the top? Should they start, there are, certain areas that they can get exposure a lot easier and then gradually build it up? I mean, you mentioned, the harder a kind of backlink or a mention on a media source it is, the harder you have to work for it. But where, if I'm a marketer and I want to get that exposure, whether it's on online platforms, where should I start with that?
Well, you should probably hire Samantha, but if you can't, and I think a lot of smaller business owners, PR might not be the first thing that they think to invest money in, just like SEO isn't necessarily. I think the first kind of exposure you can get is through your existing contacts. They say that in the first year of business, most of your clients will be friends or friends of friends or people you've worked with before. I think the same happens with exposure. And I've always I've got this kind of good karma approach to, getting exposure, in that I try to help people out who are as appreciative of the help as I am of their help, if you see what I mean. So I am not going and trying to get on Amy Porterfield's podcast, because who the heck am I to her? But if I reach out to another person who has a podcast that's maybe just starting, yeah, sure, maybe it doesn't have an amazing audience downloads, but it's started. We both benefit. They're highly likely to make a fuss of having me on the podcast and vice versa. And we kind of both lift each other up. So I kind of try and work with my peer group, helping people who are on kind of my level, or even to a degree reaching down rather than reaching up. And somebody who's just starting out, like I've often been the first guest on lots of people's podcasts. And at that point, they have no listenership. But then some of those podcasts have gone on to be hugely successful. And then when I come back 2 years later and they've got the listeners, it's good karma. So helping people out to help you. And also Boden mentioned something, and this I also think is good karma, like helping support charities, giving donations, being visible in that way. You're genuinely helping, but obviously they're also maybe going to mention you, maybe give you a backlink. So there's benefit back, but you've actually done something good to get something good. So I'm all about the good feelings.
It's all about the good karma. Mm-hmm. Samantha, what do you think about that?
That was such good advice, Kate. I think one of the sort of a misconception, but also one of the things where people do tend to go wrong with PR is if you're starting out and nobody does know you and you have no awareness, that aiming for the top is a waste of time and a really bad expectation, or it's not a realistic expectation. So as Kate said, you might be going for some of those podcasts that are just launching, or those media titles online that, you would look at it and say, who the heck is even reading it? The point is you have to start somewhere, and the best clients that we've worked with who have gone on to amazing success years later, because it does take years to get to that level of coverage where people actually do really know you en masse, they bite at everything. They're the fastest to reply to an opportunity. They're always saying yes within reason and time of doing things within their organization, but they're the ones that don't look at it and go, oh, that's beneath me. So, you don't necessarily need a big budget to start with PR. And if you're starting small, sometimes you are the PR. You're the PR, the people who work for you are the PR. So you really need to think of PR as much broader than just a specific campaign or hiring an agency, particularly at the beginning.
Yeah. Can I add something there? Because something I think that I really misunderstood about PR until very recently, so I'm going to look like an idiot, is I really thought that it had to be a newsworthy story. Like something had happened. I always remember being asked to write a press release for this IT company, and they'd got one new car parking space in the car park, and they wanted to do a press release about that. And I was like, that's not really news, but I thought that it had to be kind of an event or something that had happened, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that. I'm sure Samantha can explain that better to me. Nothing eventful happens in my business, but it's about having stories and pictures and an opinion on maybe something that's happening now, or just a good luck story or a success story. We all need the panda story at the end of the news. You can be the panda story. Do you know what I mean, Samantha? Like, I think people think they have to have something super exciting happening.
Yeah, I mean, it comes back to Boden's point, find something unique. You don't always have an announcement, something exciting to tell every month of the year, but you can offer an expert opinion. You can come up with something unique and think forwards. And that's where PRs and marketing should work really closely together, because you're helping drive almost, the PR ideas can help drive what the marketing teams do within your business. Yeah, it doesn't always have to be newsworthy or what you think is a news announcement to get some coverage.
Just to also add to that point, I always think of like approaching the really big publications as like working your way up a ladder. So like Kate and Samantha have both said, like the low hanging fruit, it's sort of mutually beneficial. Like they're creating content. They might not have an audience. You're helping with them. They're helping you by getting your word out there. But no one reads the media more than people that work in the media. So a lot of the times those little things will get picked up by sort of a middle tier publication, which will get picked up by a bigger one. And sometimes you have to help push it up the ladder, obviously, and sort of copy the links and say, oh, we were covered in this small publication. We're a small company. You probably haven't heard of it, because reporters like to feel like they've uncovered something. And all of a sudden you've worked your way up that ladder, and then you're more comfortable pitching to like a Forbes or a Wall Street Journal or something. Whereas if you tried that from the start, you might have had no chance.
That's a good point. There's something you said over there. What did you mean by making them feel they've uncovered something?
Well, I think that's pretty important with every pitch. Like the one panel I did with you guys probably almost 2 years ago now, we had Dave from The Australian on there, and he said he only opens emails if exclusive is in the subject. And a lot of reporters won't admit to that. But like if you're just, and it goes back to my point about not writing press releases, if you're sending the same thing out to everyone, the chances of them covering it are pretty unlikely, because they don't want to just write about what everyone else is writing about. You need to give them a unique angle specifically for them. So yeah, like especially in the early days when our company was 10 people and we started working with NFL teams, my whole pitch was like, we're a tiny Australian company. You've never heard of us. No one's heard of us in America, but our technology is being worn by like some of the best athletes in the US. And like it was a gimme in terms of PR. Like there's no way they weren't going to write about it. But now we're a little bit bigger, and if I were to pitch like an AFL story now, a Herald Sun writer would be like, yeah, we know what you guys are doing. Like that's not unique. So it needs to be something like uncoverable for them. Right.
Now, Samantha, you talked about measuring PR, and that's important because the marketer needs to report up, and sometimes the management or the upper management or leadership might not have that kind of knowledge of how marketing and PR would work. So they in a short period of time, they could say, no, this is not working. Can it? Stop it. How should somebody go and measure PR?
So the first thing I would say is that you need to work out why you're doing PR. And sometimes we've had people come to us in the past and say, we don't have a massive budget, but we just want to do some PR because we need to get 2,000 leads to the site, or we need to get 2,000 people to sign up. And the first question I'll ask is, what else are you doing in and around marketing and comms to help drive that? Because if you're looking just to PR to do something that's quite a measurable outcome, I would say probably forget it, because that's not necessarily going to come just from PR. But we have clients that would measure PR because they have picked up leads that have opened opportunities for international markets. So again, but that will tie back to their business objectives of wanting to go to international. So you can, PR is not as I said before, it's not as definitive as say an online social media campaign where you can measure the clicks, or you can measure the signups, or, the engagement in that way. But it's definitely, if you're, if for an example, you're looking to raise capital, and we have a lot of clients that are in that position or are looking to do a Series B or a Series A after they've gone through that process initially. It could be about generating coverage that then goes into a portfolio that can be put in front of investors when they're pitching for capital. And so for them, that's a measurement. That's an outcome that they can look at and go, that works for us. So there's a variety of ways you can check measurement on PR, but it's very much about defining what the business objective is first, and then tying the comms back to, work towards that goal.
Yeah, gotcha. Kate, how do you go about measuring from the SEO perspective and the digital perspective? Is it, is that connected to backlinks? How does measurement work for you from this SEO standpoint?
Well, I think that where everyone thinks it comes from is just looking at ranking, where am I ranking for a particular term? But in truth, ranking changes all the time. It's very subjective. It's all linked in with personalization. So depending on what you're logged into, if you visited the site before. So you never really can get a true picture of ranking. And also ranking something you can't control, because obviously it's a leaderboard. And if one of your competitors is doing more than you at that particular week, they could rank above you, even though you've done all the things. So these days, we obviously care about ranking, but we also look at engagement factors. So, how much time are people spending on the site? What percent of visitors are new versus repeat? So, if you've done a big PR campaign, you'd expect to see the new to go up, where that audience is coming from, what device they're using it on. You can look at referral links. So you can very clearly see in Google Analytics that this piece of media in this particular area drove traffic to your site. So you can look at referral links and then what they did then. So you can set up goals within Google Analytics to say, well, then they looked at another page and then they ended up on my contact page. So I can actually pretty much directly say that that was as a result of the PR. But also the big thing we look at is, looking at the keywords that are doing well and hoping that you're getting more branded search results. So that's that whole thing of people are actually searching for Toon, not SEO course, because they've actually heard about me and my brand awareness is working. And that's, the people who are, they're kind of bottom of funnel people. We really want those people because they don't just want any old SEO course, they want mine, and they're highly more likely to convert if they put my name in. So there's a lot of different metrics you can look at there.
Yeah, that last one was an interesting one, and it kind of it was driven home for me by a recent conversation that I was having with someone when they're, one of their metrics where they were measuring the voice of the brand, and that was particularly it. Like they were measuring, there was a certain period that they measured how many times people were searching their specific brand on Google, and then comparing that to a later time in terms of like, did that change? And then they were associating that with a lot of the brand building and the PR work that they were
It's
doing.
actually a really important tactic, and you'll see a lot of PR people doing this now as well, that at the end of the article, instead of, sometimes a lot of media outlets won't actually let you have a direct link, and also often in social media, having a link within a particular post will actually reduce the visibility of that post. So what people are doing more is, instead of having a link, saying search for, the recipe for SEO success in Google. I mean, obviously there you have to hope that you are ranking pretty high. Don't do that if you're not ranking really well. But what that does is people search for that, they find you, they click on your result, and they stay on your page. And we believe that Google sees that kind of engagement and the fact that the user hasn't pogoed straight back out to the search results to search again. It goes, wow, this must be the right results. So the more people who are searching for your brand, over time, that will actually improve your ability to rank for that term, but also it's a rising tide lifts all boats. So it improves your ranking overall for all the other terms that aren't brand related. So that's a clever little tactic you can use, especially if you can't get a link, because sometimes you don't get a link, do you, Samantha? They don't let you have one.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. Okay. Now, before I ask my next question, one of the things that I want to say to everyone who's listening is, if you have questions, make sure to pop it in the Q&A section. There, I know there is on Zoom, there's like chat, and then there is Q&A. So make sure you drop it in. I think we have some in the chat box. So if you could transfer that, it's a lot easier for me to look at the Q&A. Let's take a few questions from there. So Lisa is asking, Kate, can you please outline the steps you mentioned about getting links to other sites or platforms that give me a good SEO position?
So in the world of links, a particular platform called Moz uses a metric called domain authority. And domain authority is kind of Google's scorecard for how great it thinks that site is, how cool it is, basically. And so generally, when we're looking to get links, we want to get links from sites with high domain authority. It's pretty straightforward. A link from the New York Times is going to be worth a little bit more than a link from, Shahin's blog about hamsters or whatever. You want to get links from high-profile websites because they're more SEO love they have, the more SEO love passes down the tube. So you would probably, the first thing you would do is look at what links your competitors have. So using a tool like Ahrefs or SEMrush or Moz, pop your competitor's name in, look at all the backlinks that they have, and make that your shopping list. They managed to get an article on flying solo. You pitch an article to Flying Solo. They were on, this particular podcast. You pitch that particular podcast. That can be a great way to start and identify opportunities. But honestly, link outreach really doesn't work that well. I mean, I must get 20 unsolicited requests to be on my podcast a week, which I just delete. It's really about building relationships, so going out and being the first to comment on someone's stuff, sharing people's stuff, encouraging them, helping them, so that when you do then pitch to them, then they know who you are. And I think this is why, again, people don't get PR, because they think, well, I just write one press release, send it to my PR person, and I'll be famous. And it's like, no. You have to build up a relationship, sometimes over months, over years, with that media outlet before they will feature anything. And the same goes for guest blogs, podcasts, everything else. You have to have a relationship. So yeah, start building the love now, I would say.
So start building the love. And yeah, the human element is quite strong in the whole SEO work. And yeah, now my hamster blog is doing quite well. I mean, if anyone.
Yeah, I want a link. You promised me a link from your favorite hamster page. That's your best page.
I'll work on that. We'll chat to Alex about that.
Hey, it's Alex from Xgrowth. I just wanted to take a moment to tell you about the Growth Colony Slack channel. Do you ever find yourself stuck with a B2B problem? Need a second opinion on your next campaign? Or looking for some feedback on that piece of MarTech you're thinking to purchase? Well, that's why we created the Growth Colony Slack channel. This Slack channel is like a small dinner party where you get to meet and mingle with B2B professionals, hear what others are doing, and keep up to date with the latest B2B trends and news. You'll also get access to a range of exclusive content from our podcasts, webinars, and events. The best thing about it, it's all free. If this sounds interesting, head over to growthcolony.org/Slack and sign up. That's growthcolony.org/Slack.
Okay, the other thing that I wanted to talk about is when should I seek external help? Like does that become, you both Samantha and Boden, let's start with you, Samantha. Like, at what point do you feel like you can bring the most value to someone who is looking to do PR?
Look, I think the first question that you need to answer is why now? So why do you want to do PR now? And are you ready? So there's two questions, why now and are you ready? And, I've written before like about a checklist that I've got for going through with people, are you ready for PR? So it's ticking off things, budget could be one of them. If you're looking to source somebody externally to help you, then you absolutely need budget. As a business person going to another business person saying, hey, can you do this for me for $500 or $1,000 for 3 months? Is that actually a fair proposition? But it's not just about budget. It's about what have you got? What sort of news have you got coming up in the pipeline? Are you ready in terms of your online owned collateral? So, do you have a website? And some of this stuff sounds extremely basic, but you'd be surprised. Do you have a good functioning website? Do you have some great profile images, or are you prepared to invest in some imagery? Because imagery can get you a lot more coverage than just, speaking to somebody and doing an interview. So there's a whole checklist on that. And I think also when you start thinking about your business, where is your time best spent? So, where do you fit in the business? Startups, founders, you're doing everything. You've got juggling roles, multiple hats. But at what point do you get to the point where you go, okay, now I need to start delegating to either people internally or delegating to an external expert in an area like PR or SEO or digital marketing? And looking at what that's going to cost and looking at your budget, and then deciding that your time maybe is better spent elsewhere in the business rather than trying to put on the PR hat as well as everything else.
Yeah, gotcha. But what are your thoughts on that? When, I don't know if you and the team work with PR agencies. I mean, I feel like you guys have got big enough that you might be. But what point was it that you started seeking external help?
Yeah, so I think the last time I did a PR panel, I went a little strong on the "you don't need a PR agency" angle, just do it yourself message. The majority of the panel were from agencies, and I think they all got a drink together afterwards and didn't invite me. So I'll back off on that message a little bit this time. But so at Catapult specifically, I've worked in a few scenarios. So one man band sort of across the board, like all marketing, PR, everything. Having a PR manager reporting to me, so a dedicated person, and then managing one agency, managing multiple agencies. So we've sort of experimented with quite a few things. So like the budget point, I think like if you want to just start experimenting with PR, like obviously you need to pay someone's salary, but besides that, you can get away with it with limited or no budget. So the first year at Catapult, I think I prioritized PR and small events more than anything else. And we had features in sort of Fast Company, Inc., New York Times, ESPN, Sports Illustrated, like the type of publications that we're going after for sort of sport tech business. And our marketing budget was well under 100,000, and I put the vast majority of that into events for existing customers. So everything media-wise that we got was basically just my salary. But again, that was that's what I was prioritizing. So it takes a lot of time. So before you throw yourself into it, just be prepared to drop a lot of other things, as Samantha was saying. So obviously using an agency will get your results much faster, but you'll be paying accordingly. But I think to go back to sort of the public part of public relations that sort of got mentioned earlier, it's probably important to note that like the public part, I think, suggests that it's a faceless public, and to be successful in PR today, you need to treat it more like people relations, because so much of it is how you create and maintain relationships with people. And I guess that's the biggest advantage, or one of the biggest advantages of working with an agency. They already have that distribution in place. They already have the relationships in place. So as long as you're dedicating the time to feeding them the right information and finding those unique angles, then there'll be a good working relationship there. But you can't just, and to Samantha's point, and Kate's point, you can't just throw them a PR release and say, can you go make magic happen? Like, it doesn't matter how good they are. You still have to put some time investment into it.
There's some homework to be done there.
Yeah.
Okay. Kate, did you want to mention something there?
Yeah, I just think for me, because I've been a very DIY approach, that's kind of my mantra, with SEO and copywriting. But I think you get to the point where you've kind of exhausted your peer group, literally and figuratively. And also when you really want to start working with more premium publications, that they do have a certain way of working. They have certain agencies they work with. They have a certain way that they want to receive information. So I think, and also PR agencies obviously have all those relationships in place. They know what they're doing. They're going to look at your pitch and go, that's not the right pitch. So I think there's kind of a certain amount of grassroots stuff you can do yourself to get started. But then when you're a bit more serious, you do need the help of an expert. As with anything, you can do your own accountancy for a bit, but then when you're getting bigger, you need to hire an accountant. And I also think it's when you financially can afford that, and also when your business is at a point where you have some real stories to tell. The startup story, yeah, it's kind of cool if you've got a really quirky product, but if you're just a general startup, there's not really much of a story there. Once you're 10 years in and you've had a real roller coaster and some real things to talk about, and maybe some standpoints as well, some stuff you stand for, and maybe some soapbox areas, then I think it's like time to bring in the big guns.
The big guns. All right. Okay. Thank you very much for that. Now let's dive a little bit deeper into some of the questions that are coming up. So Samantha, do I need to know who my audience is for B2B PR? Will that determine what publications I should pitch or my messaging? I feel like there's a sharp answer coming for that one, Samantha.
One word. Yes. Look, I think yes is the answer for that. And you're probably going to have different audiences. I'm not sure who was behind that question, but in terms of, it's the same thing. It's business objectives. It's knowing who your audience is for the PR campaign. What do you want them to get out of it? Is it to buy? Is it to just know about you? Is it to invest? Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yes. Let's go with the answer to that question. Absolutely. Yes. So, okay. The next one. Could you each recommend a good, solid web host that allows self-editing of site, maybe range from low end to mid-range, example, WordPress upward? Is there, I mean, this is not necessarily PR focused, but is there a short answer for this that you have, Kate?
Yeah, I would say that all the content management platforms now, content management systems are improving from an SEO point of view. So it depends what type of store you want to, what type of site you want to have. Store, then maybe Shopify, Squarespace is an option. But I would always opt with WordPress if I could, because it just has that edge, and also you actually own your site. If you're on Shopify or Squarespace, you don't own your website. You're hosted on their platform. They can switch you off whenever they like. So WordPress has a bit more of a learning curve and needs kind of a bit more love and maintenance as it goes on. Shopify, it's, you can kind of set and forget to a degree. But if I would pick all my sites, all my 7 websites, yes, they're all on WordPress. So I would highly recommend that. And the hosted version, not the WordPress hosted version. So you want to self-host your WordPress website.
Thank you very much for that. So but if we got PR questions, put them through. I know there is a difference between chat and Q&A. Please make sure to put them in the Q&A. Let's take another one from Lee. Do journalists respond to cold outreach for pitches from companies? Can the content by itself be enough, or is it better to aim to build some relationship or go through an agency that has a relationship? So we've answered this to some degree, okay? So we've definitely answered the second part of it. But what about the first part, cold pitches? What are your experiences? Who wants to take that one?
I'm happy to jump in.
Go for it.
I don't think yes, relationships are extremely important, and business is built on relationships. It doesn't matter what industry it is. But if you've got a great story and you've got a great hook and you position it in a way that it's short and sharp and to the point and it suits that publication you're pitching, then the journalist isn't going to worry too much about where it's coming from. That's my short answer. Fantastic.
Thank you very much for that. Boden, I feel like you unmuted. Did you want to say something there?
Yeah, no, completely agree. I would say probably 95% of our media coverage has been from a cold pitch. A lot of the follow-up pitches will be once you've built that relationship and you sort of have your go-to journalists. So if you do release a product or something a little bit smaller that you know that'll fit in that person's wheelhouse and they're your go-to, then you can go back to them. But most of the time it is a cold pitch. And that's when you do need to understand what makes you interesting. But yeah, absolutely, you should have confidence in sending that out.
Yeah, just do that cold outreach. Okay. The last topic that I want to talk about today is personal branding, SEO, and PR, right? And how this kind of connects with one another. Samantha, can I start with you? I know you've done a lot of work in that space and you do a lot of work with startups. Personal branding versus kind of company brand. What are your thoughts on that?
It's a topic that I absolutely love. So I'm very happy to talk about it. And, that's what we build the agency on, because my entire background in business has been always about leveraging the profile of a founder or a business leader to help build the company brands. People buy people. It's as simple as that. You can look at the big brands that have been around for decades, like Nike, and Phil Knight, who's the founder, or Apple and Steve Jobs. They're very obvious ones, but those brands initially started by selling the founder story. You look at a more local context, Melanie Perkins from Canva, or some of you might know from LinkedIn videos, Nick Bell from Removify, and his other multiple digital marketing agencies. Like those people have always been successful in leveraging their profile to get into the press. So if you think about the media coverage you've seen on those brands, it's often driven by the spokesperson or a story in and around the founder. One thing that people do worry about, which we speak to clients a lot about, is that they either don't want to be famous, they're terrified of the media, they don't want it to be about themselves, or they're worried that, in 5 years' time when they're trying to sell the business, that the brand is so closely associated to their personal profile that it would be hard to distinguish between the two. They're all really good, valid points. but definitely not points, points that should make you shy away from building a personal brand, because it's your story, it's your unique position that people are going to initially trust and gravitate to. So it's really, really important, I think, to start with the founder story and build from there.
Gotcha. Kate, what are your thoughts on this? Because you have also built an amazing personal brand. I remember, we did a podcast and you were like, well, if you search, I think you said copywriter Sydney, I'm the first result. And I'm like, all right, Kat, let's have a look at this. And I did that, and it's just like, boom, first results. And obviously that's from a SEO perspective, but you do a lot of work around your own personal brand. What are your thoughts in terms of, again, personal brand, SEO, and PR, and that mix?
Well, I think when I, for the first 5 or so years in my business, I was one of those people Samantha talked about. I didn't really want to put myself out there. I think there's also a degree of, do I look the right way? Am I interesting enough? Am I enough of an expert? Are people going to doubt me? It's that confidence thing, and that takes time, that imposter syndrome to get over. And I actually created, I mentioned my business names. I created brands to kind of hide behind, because I was like, people will take them more seriously if they don't think I'm associated with them. Ridiculous. In reality, people buy my products because of me, because there's a million SEO courses, but mine's got me, and that's what people are buying into. And they're either going to love or hate me. Good PR, good marketing sometimes has to be divisive. It's as much about repelling people as it is about attracting. Not everyone's going to like you, and that's okay. But especially with the kind of offerings I have, you're going to be spending a lot of time with me. I think my SEO course has 100 videos. So if you don't like me now, you're going to hate me by the end of the course asking for a refund. So it's important for a lot of reasons to kind of build up, a relationship, as we've talked about. But with SEO, there's also another kind of part of the algorithm. It's called EAT: expertise, authority, and trust. And Google has ways of looking at us. We all have a digital footprint, just like we all have an environmental footprint, and we all have mentions of ourselves out there. Whether we get the link or not, we have citations. And if we keep seeing the name Kate Toon next to SEO, and keep, I mentioned in an article, I'm on a podcast, I'm on a panel, I'm speaking, I donated to a thing, over time Google goes, well, hey, this person really must know what they're talking about. So it's building up this idea of who we are, and PR is a huge part of that. That's just getting your name out there, builds up a trust, builds up the relationship, but it's actually part of the algorithm as well. How Google does it, they're not particularly clear on that, but it's a lot to do with just mentions of your name alongside your expertise.
Gotcha. Boden, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, you are in the engine. I mean, Catapult obviously has this very strong brand. You have some very, very high-profile investors on the company, from Mark Cuban to some of the other people that are there. But has ever been building a personal brand a topic inside of the organization for the founders or the CEO of the organization, or that hasn't been a focus for you and Lee?
It has. Yeah, so I'm big on Simon Sinek's golden circle and understanding your why before you start communicating anything as a business. So the idea that it's not what you do and it's why you do it is an important one to keep in mind within your communications, internally or externally. So I think inherently founders are closer to the why than the people they hire. So it makes sense for media to want to engage with the source of that why. So I think in the early days, we struggled with that a little bit at Catapult, because we had 2 co-founders. They were engineers. They didn't want to talk to media. They didn't want to talk to people in general. So it was difficult to pitch and say, "Oh, I'll put you in touch with our founder." I was lucky in that our executive chairman at the time, and is still with us, and he's the one that brought Mark Cuban on as an investor. He's really good with media. So basically my job was just to line up interviews between him and anyone in the media, and he would do the rest, because he's just very sort of outspoken, but intelligent, and just knows a little bit about everything. So if you have someone like that in your business, you really need to capitalize on it, because anyone that works in the media loves dealing with media talent like that. But to go back to the founder point, yeah, it was difficult to create awareness and get them to understand the importance of it in the early days. And I sort of just fell back on our executive chairman as a result. Since then, we had a new CEO that started last November, and he joined from Amazon. So he's based in Boston. And it's been sort of going through the whole process again in being able to attach his name and even the Amazon brand to a certain extent to our brand through PR. And it was a focus the last couple of months. We had our FY20 results come out last month and announced that we were cash flow positive a few weeks before that. And I was just pitching so many stories around having this Amazon executive join the business, not turn the business around, but just sort of the influence he's had in the first sort of 10 months. And we got some really good results around it. So as Samantha and Kate have said, every business is a people business. So lead with your people and don't always lead with your brand.
Awesome. That's great to hear. I wasn't sure what to expect from you and the answer you provide, because just like you said, I know founders were engineers and we're not very into getting out in front of the public. So okay, we got about 10 minutes. Let us smash through some Q&A in the last 5 or 10 minutes of this conversation. So Bill, for an average small and medium business, what's the indicative? And what I would appreciate is let's go through as many questions as possible. So therefore, let's give short answers again, if possible. For an average small and medium business, what's the indicative annual budget for PR to be effective in ratio or percentage of total operating budget? Oof.
Samantha.
Numbers. Any input on any of that? Anyone?
So was it Bill, was it?
So, Bill.
Yeah, Bill. Hi, Bill. Look, what I would say is there's so many questions you need to ask before you get to that. And I know that's not probably the answer that you wanted, but you really need to look at the scope of work that's involved in what PR you want to do for that business. And small to medium business, that's quite large. Like there's that, I think what's a small business or medium business in this country is like 50 million or more turnover down to nothing or close to that. So I think it's a question that you'd need a lot longer answer to than we've got time for, but I would look at the scope of work and look at what sort of budget you think you might have to start with and then go from there.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's a great answer. And I think, for different companies, the ratio is going to be different. Some people are going to be focused heavily on PR. Some people focus on Google Ads, whatever it is. But no, thanks for that. How would you go about approaching a publication or journalist that replied no to your pitch?
I'm sure Samantha's got a great answer here, but I must say I would take it and go away and come up with a better pitch. People say, I get emails from people for my podcast and I'm not a proper even podcast, and they maybe send me 16 emails in a row, and the last one I get is well, okay, I'm really disappointed in you. I really wanted to have name of person on your podcast. I feel like you've really let the podcast down, and I'm just I didn't what. So don't keep pushing, I think. But Samantha, probably you got a better answer to that.
I was interested to hear what Boden would say as well, because I don't know whether you've ever gotten any no's, but look, I think it depends on the journalist in terms of, where do you go next? Some journalists, because journalists are all very, very time poor. So some journalists are more likely to respond if you went back and said, oh, thanks for the feedback, because you're lucky if you get the feedback, to be honest. Yeah. So if you get the feedback, then maybe you can go back and ask, what was it about the story or the pitch that, didn't work for you, or what can I change, or go back with some alternatives. But it really does depend on the individual journalist, I think, about how far you can take that, because everybody has a different response approach.
Yeah, it's a tough one. To go back to David Swan from the Australian, that last panel, he said he gets 80 pitches a day. So most reporters won't respond to you. So you're unlikely to get a no, you just won't get a response. But you don't always know if they even saw it, because they're getting that many emails and everyone's on a deadline. So follow up a couple times, tweak your pitch, go about it a different way. But don't send 16 in a row like Kate mentioned. You don't want to annoy anyone.
Yeah, 16 touch cadence could be a bit too much. It sounds very American. Yeah. As per panel, what is the difference between PR and marketing? Where do we draw the line? Thanks.
Okay.
Samantha, you want to take this?
I'll just jump in really quick. Look, I think ultimately they work really closely together if you're doing it well. But marketing, you control the messages. You're paying for the space. In most cases, is where PR. You've got to really think about where are you pitching and why do they care. So step away from why you think it's important or what you're trying to sell, and go, why would that journalist or that media outlet care? How does it fit for their audience? So it's just a bit of a mind shift.
Cool. Next question. What's the best way to research what's the best way to research who you should be reaching out to pitch your story? Boden?
Yeah, I'm probably going to give an awful answer, but this is genuinely what I do. So if I want to pitch like a soccer story in the UK about a new feature we've released, I'll go to a bunch of UK newspapers. I'll read a couple of soccer stories, pick the top journalists, find them on social media. If I can't find their email address, I'll go to the contact page of the newspaper to figure out sort of the generic email. And then I'll just try a couple different ones, like first name dot last name or first initial last name, whatever it is. And then once you've got that, that's sort of the beginning of the cold pitch.
That's where the cold pitch starts. Okay. Actually, on this, Kate, do you want to mention anything on this one? Because I feel like there's a lot of this that happens with regards to getting backlinks.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, one of the first places to start is by looking at your competitors and where they've got backlinks for. Also looking at existing articles that are out there and maybe using something like BuzzSumo to see who shared that content. When it comes to getting on podcasts, which is something, it's going to be my main PR channel because I'm lazy and podcasts are relatively easy to get on with, really actually taking the time to see what the podcast is about. Like, I get people pitching podcasts and they don't ever have guests. So it's like, they've never had a guest. Why would they? It's not the format of the show or, and I think really important thing for just pitching in general is, as Boden mentioned, people are busy, so make their life easy. So I love a pitch where it's like they give me a really good title for the podcast, they give me a blurb, they give me 6 bullet points. You might remember this, Shahin. They all, and someone cheeky the other day said something really cute. They actually took a screenshot of a review they'd just written for my podcast, which in the spirit of reciprocity, I felt, well, I had to at least reply. I thought that was clever. So make my life easy. If you give me a fully formed episode that's well-researched, has takeouts, is good to go, you've just saved me a lot of effort. If you come on and just say, I'm awesome, have me on your podcast, then I've got to try and work out what the story is. Don't make me work out what the story is.
Thank you very much. That was a great answer. Okay. What time is it? Let's take 2 more questions. Following from Samantha's comment, what's the best way to start building the founder story for an introvert? Samantha.
Jumping in on that one. Well, ultimately, I say that people genuinely have to want to do it, because if you're not genuine and authentic when you're doing this stuff, then it's going to come across really fast. I think just start small. I think if you're an introvert, and look, I'm the same. Like, I don't really like the media or being in front of the camera or doing photo shoots. I do host a podcast now, but it's just something that I worked at gradually, and I took the realization that if I want to get my business out there and my brand out there, then people need to start to see a face behind it. And I think you need to change or think about, your approach to that. And then just work at it slowly, get some training, media training, work with a coach if you need to get a little bit better at it. And over time, you actually probably will start to enjoy it.
Thank you for that. That was a great answer. Last question. Okay. This is actually, okay, maybe we'll do 2 more questions. Okay, 2 more questions. What to look for in a good PR firm? Samantha, Boden, anyone wants to go for this?
Boden, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. So we've worked with a few in the past. I think some sort of expertise in your industry is pretty important. I think PR agencies range from really boutique, from like potentially one person to a handful of people, right up to huge global organizations. One pitched us recently that are in 230 cities around the world, which I didn't even realize was possible for a PR agency. So there's everything sort of on that spectrum in between. So one, like matching that scale with yours. Like, do you need a global organization? Do you just need something local? Do you prefer to just have one contact point that's actually doing the work, or do you want to work with a team and an account manager? And then, expertise in your field. Like if we were to get pitched for a PR agency that's never worked in sports or never worked in technology, and even more so if they haven't worked in sports technology, then it's difficult to sort of picture the onboarding process, because you have to hold their hand a lot through the early stages and explain competitors and all that sort of thing. So to me, that would be the most important thing, feeling like they could just hit the ground running with it.
Gotcha. Samantha, you want to add anything to that?
Oh, I just think cultural fit is so important. So, back to Boden's point about size and experience, I think that's really important. But also, I think you need to get an understanding for whether you think that you share similar like cultural values and work in a similar way. Because I know that in the past, where I perhaps like had a weird feeling about a potential client and then went, no, we'll sign them because that's, it's a good thing for the business. And then, 3, 4, 5 months down the track, it just hasn't gelled. So for me, that's a really big standout point to save, a lot of time and money down the track.
Thank you very much.
And I would just quickly add digital literacy. Like, don't pick a PR agency that's all about just print. Pick a PR agency that understands, the online space well, and the opportunities that can be gained from being on webinars, podcast, guest posting, that isn't just all about getting your article in the Sydney Morning Herald. There's much more to PR than that.
Hey, it's Alex again from X Growth. Thanks so much for joining us on this episode. If you enjoyed it, we'd love it if you take a moment to rate us on Apple Podcasts. It would really help get the word out to other B2B professionals. If you're hungry for more B2B content, make sure to join our Slack channel at growthcolony.org/Slack, where we share the latest B2B news, tactics, tips, and chat about problems we're facing in the B2B space and find solutions together. That's growthcolony.org/Slack. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you in the next episode.